morning, good afternoon, good evening. I am so excited to bring you the next podcast guest, and it is a dear friend of mine, Bancy Gakuru. Bancy has had a very illustrious HR career across regions, starting from Africa, the continent of Africa, Kenya to be more specific, then moving to Asia, then moving to Europe, and then going back to Africa. She's really come a full circle, and I think in her various roles, both as HR executives, as mentor for various organizations, but also for Thrive with Mentoring, and in her role as a mom, trying to balance her career with her responsibilities as a mom. I think this will be a very interesting conversation. A warm welcome to you, Bansi. How are you today?
I'm fine, Shivangi. Really nice to be here to share my experience, and thanks for having me.
Well, I do know about, quite a few parts of your journey, but for our listeners, can you tell us a little bit about what made you, have this, let me say, so many continents on your career journey? What was your thinking behind that, and how did that come about?
This actually started with one simple conversation about my career. I really wanted to grow in leadership. And at that time, I was working for Africa Middle East region, based outside of Nairobi, and knew a lot of women who are high-profile women in the HR space. And most people at that time had already had a chance to work abroad. And my partner challenged me and said, if you went for an interview with all these amazing people in your circles, do you think that you'd get a job? And I said, probably, but I would be missing something. And that was international experience. And that's how the whole idea of working across borders came by for me.
Yeah, I mean, as we know, many things start with a simple conversation. But you have quite a prolific jump, right, in terms of going on multiple continents. What were the sort of skill set and mindset you think you brought that enabled all of these moves?
One is courage, because just that sort of moving with a 4-year-old in a foreign land where you're Black and Black people are minority there already, that was a lot of people asking, is this really going to work? Is this the right environment for a little 4-year-old? So you need a lot of courage. And then you need to have the ability to learn and to unlearn, because the minute you find yourself in a different culture, there are a lot of things that seem strange, but they're not really strange. They're only different. And then you've got to get used to eating different food, interacting differently. There's a lot to learn, and there's also a lot to unlearn in that journey. The other thing that I think is really, really important is resilience, because there are so many challenges that come your way. And being resilient and being able to handle those things, knowing when to seek for help, knowing when to go the extra mile to find help in your own way is really important to be able to cope and to be able to excel in those situations.
Love that, Bansi, especially the thing that you said around unlearning, right? Because I think we always focus a lot on learning, but there are certain beliefs maybe or certain ways of doing things that we need to unlearn. And sometimes that unlearning process may not be straightforward. What does home mean to you now? How has this definition of what home is evolved as you have lived on so many continents?
Yeah. When I reflect on home, what is home for me? Home is where I feel fulfilled. And it doesn't have to be a place, and it could change with time. So in my movements around the many places I've lived, there are places I felt very fulfilled. And at some point, I didn't feel fulfilled anymore. So it didn't feel like home anymore. So when I lived in Singapore, I enjoyed it. But at some point, I knew I need to leave because I did not feel fulfilled anymore. And now I've come back to work for Africa. I'm doing a role serving Africa, Middle East, including Turkey and Pakistan. And I really feel at home because my work is very meaningful. I've reconnected with family back home. I'm closer to my daughter. And for my needs right now, this actually meets my needs. So home for me is where I feel fulfilled.
Thank you. Thank you. Bansi, can you share perhaps a story about a moment when you felt a strong sense of belonging, despite not being in your home country, right? So what is it that made that moment special, where you really felt, oh, I really belong here?
Yeah. So during COVID, the movement was restricted and it was really difficult to travel and come back into countries. And if you came back, then you went into quarantine for 2 weeks. And this happened to me when I was in Singapore. I needed to go back to Kenya because my dad had been diagnosed with cancer. So I had no choice but to go back with my daughter and then come back to Singapore. And we were put in quarantine for two weeks with a little girl. It was very difficult. And it was the acts of kindness from my colleagues. I didn't have any family in Singapore, but I had people drop food to me, different cuisines. I had people bring toys for my daughter, deliver toys or a book, coloring or some beads where she could do some handcrafts. And I always remember those moments with a lot of joy because it was family away from home. And this is how you know families are not biological.
Beautiful. Yes, yes. I remember those times. I think the definition of home and family and friends, everything got revised for so many of us, because we were put in this microcosm of experiences that we couldn't influence much, right? They were completely out of control for most people experiencing that. And I do remember that Singapore was one of the toughest places, to be assimilating if you had traveled out.
Yeah.
Is there a cultural tradition, Bansi, or a practice from your home country? Now, I know you went back, but was there actually a practice that you continued to observe or celebrate, when you were not in your home country?
I would say hosting without the main list of guests and allowing people who are not part of the guest list to come to the party. And it was really my way to mingle and expand my circles. So I always said I invited a few people. I had this habit of inviting people home. And I always said, if you're with a friend, just before you come to my house, bring them over. Or if a friend calls, I'll say, if they're free, ask them to join. And a lot of people found it to be very strange because it's 2 hours for lunch. 4 guests, it's 4 guests, and you cook 4 pieces of chicken. But that's not my culture. If you have 4 guests, you cook 12 pieces of chicken because other people might turn up. And I really enjoyed sharing this side of our culture with the rest of the world and explaining it and welcoming more people. And I guess if you speak to my friends in Singapore and in Switzerland, they will say, yes, I was always the person hosting and asking for more people to come than I'd actually invited from the word go.
That's such a lovely, sharing of that kind of hospitality and the definition of, friends and friends of friends and bringing them together. I want to shift perspectives a little bit and going back to, your professional journey. Do you remember a time, Bansi, when you took advice, and this can be from a mentor, a sponsor, a leader, a boss, whoever, that turned out to be really good or really bad? So either way, because I think we learn from both these, right? So I'm curious to know if that piece of advice, was it really good, really bad, and what did you learn from?
Yeah, I would like to share an example that relates to my move because I think this is quite relevant for this conversation. Now, when I decided that getting international experience was very important for my career, I spoke to my mentor, I spoke to my line manager, I had a coach, and I started a plan around how do I really move. And then eventually one of the senior leaders in my organization called me and said that there was a role in Singapore, and the role was similar to the role that I was doing at that time. And my first instinct was, no, I don't want to do the same job. Even though I'm moving countries, I want to do a completely different job. And then she called me back after 2 days and she said, I know that you're moving alone with your 4-year-old daughter. And I moved 6 times myself. It's not easy to move. Do not underestimate going into a foreign country, new continent with a 4-year-old and being in a completely new job. And she said, just go for it. Go in this job that you're already in because you will contribute immediately and the learning is less on the job. And you can spend the bulk of the time settling down your daughter. And with time, you can always move into another role. Just moving to the same role does not mean that you're stuck. I took the advice and it was so difficult when I landed in Singapore that I always reflected on this advice and I was happy that I took this advice. And I offer it quite often actually too, depending on the dynamics at your life at that moment. It's sometimes okay not to want to have everything at the same time and to just bite slowly by slowly and make it manageable.
Yes, such an important piece of advice, that, right, from somebody who's been there, done that. I don't know if you have started looking at yourself differently after you have made all those moves. Sometimes when we leave our home context, geographical or whichever, I think we have a different lens on who we are and who we are becoming. I'm really wondering, how has your perspective, or, is there a personal transformation or a major life change that has changed the way that you see yourself today?
I think I've definitely had some changes for sure that I'm really happy about. And some are difficult because it's not within how I was brought up, but it's still okay. I've learned to be comfortable with the new me. And I'll just highlight two things. It's how I look at differences. I think I used to be really, I knew one way and I used to look at things in one way. And even though I was working for an international company where there's a lot of exposure to diversity and we are educated on how to be inclusive, experiencing it is so different. Living with the people that are different to you and new things looking weird, but they're not weird, they're just different. Actually, a lot of people ask me, out of all the places you've lived, which is the best? And I say, to me, there's no best or bad, there's just different. And this is a new way of me to look at life that allows me to be more open to other people, to be more open to ideas, allows it for me, and that has grown based on the experiences that I've had. The other thing that I would like to highlight is my view on religion. Now, after traveling around the world, I met so many, I only knew Christians and a little bit of Muslim, because in Kenya, we have 70% Christians and 30% Muslim. And I grew up in a Christian family myself. But when I started traveling the world, I met Hindus, Muslims, Buddhists, all manner of religions. And it also occurred to me that everybody believes their religion is superior. And then I started questioning a lot about religion and asking myself how I want to turn up in the world and what should drive me more than whether I'm a Christian or I'm a Muslim. So that's another change that really happened in me and that I'm very passionate about, and made me reflect on how I want to turn up to the world, not even at work, not to my family, not to my friends, but what kind of a human being do I want to be beyond a label of a religion? And so those are, I could give many examples, but I think those are two significant changes for me.
Yeah, and that is very significant. I mean, I call high skilled immigrant women like you and me WanderWomen, right? And that is what the name of the podcast and my upcoming book is. And I really feel that we are able to build bridges across nations, across cultures, but as you said, probably also across faiths, because once you are exposed to many different ways of achieving, let's say, the same result, you start seeing how everything is interconnected. And I think especially in today's world where we've become so divisive and there are all these challenges that are being thrown on the global stage, I really feel that as high skilled immigrant women and as WanderWomen, we have a role to play, to be that glue, to be able to look at, one thing from many different perspectives so that you don't become, stuck or dogmatic around one way of doing things. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, Bancy. So yeah, last question from me. What's your best advice for other WanderWomen who are navigating, I call it reinvention, because a lot of the times you need to reinvent who you are and who you are becoming, leadership, the sense of identity or belonging, whichever element, what would be your advice to women who might be navigating that today and maybe a little bit stuck at the moment?
Yeah, I think I would say watch out for the cultural norms that hold us back. I had to make a lot of decisions that were really unconventional for me to pursue my dream and to be happy. A good example is I let my husband, my partner, to take care of my daughter for 2 years, and she was little. And in my culture, that's not very common. Usually it's women following men on career, and usually girl children are probably, most people will not leave them home with the most of the time is that we're trying to fit into cultural norms that don't really, sometimes there's no basis for it other than what everybody else is going to say. So I think we really do need to work beyond that. Then the second thing is to have a high sense of self-awareness, to work on ourselves as women, because I feel we put ourselves down a lot, and we grow up in a society where ladies have to sit like this, girls can't do this, girls can't do that. And that gets into our head, whether we like it or not. We don't realize, but it does get into our heads. So I think working on our personal growth, in addition to everything else we're doing about our careers, is what is going to make us very exceptional. Again, asking for help. I've been very fortunate to work with amazing people in my life. Yourself, Shivangi, as a close friend, I've learned a lot from you. I've had amazing line managers as well, who are not only acting as coaches and mentors, but also acting as sponsors. And the last thing, because there's a lot I could say, ask for what you want. If you really want something, go for it, ask for it, because nobody will know what's in our hearts and what's in our minds if we don't speak up. So I've realized that many times when I wanted to do something and then I started speaking to the right people about it, it just happened. Because a lot of people were working towards making it happen for me as well. So there's a lot of support out there, but we're not often going for it. And we do need, as women, to learn to ask and to go for it.
Thank you. And I think that is such an important message, right? Especially for highly ambitious women who are sort of maybe have this paradigm that you can do this yourself, right? And I think that that's so important to say, yes, I need support, and that you can ask for help. And the clarity around, not through the noise or the societal obligations to, that's what I've seen in a lot of women, that they fulfill a certain role because that's what they think it should be. And yes, indeed, I think your example of keeping your daughter with your partner back, in another country and pursuing your career, that is really like a role model, somebody who's very clear about what is the right thing for me, but also what is the right thing for my daughter at this stage, irrespective of what my cultural norms are, etc. Because in many ways, you are a trailblazer, right? How many women have done what you have done, moved from that country to so many different continents. So you really don't have any kind of role modeling, and you have to create your own path. Thank you. Thank you so much, Bancy, for your wisdom. And I look forward to staying in touch, and take care. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.